Y.N.W. Melly back in court today. His attorney saying the state has not given enough evidence to this point to keep him in jail, but prosecutors say they have proven plenty that shows he needs to remain behind.
Breaking Y.N.W. Melly's trial takes a shocking turn as ex-girlfriend is caught lying under oath. The courtroom was left in complete shock as Y.N.W. Melly's ex-girlfriend was exposed for lying under oath, throwing the entire trial into chaos. This stunning revelation has raised serious questions. Was she pressured into this? Did she just destroy Melly's last chance at freedom? Or is there an even bigger truth she's desperately trying to hide? This case has already been full of unexpected twists, but this latest development changes everything. Just days ago, she stood before the court, delivering what seemed to be a crucial testimony. However, new evidence now suggests she may have fabricated key details, leaving everyone questioning her true motives. Was she influenced by outside forces? Did she strike a deal with the prosecution? And most importantly, what does this mean for Y.N.W. Melly's fate? The judge's reaction spoke volumes. This isn't just another courtroom moment. This could reshape the entire case, and Melly's legal team is already working on their next move. The internet is exploding with reactions, with some even calling for the case to be thrown out. Could this be the turning point Melly has been waiting for? Stay tuned as we break down every shocking detail of this unfolding drama. Y.N.W. Melly's trial in chaos as ex-girlfriend's testimony falls apart. Here's where things get messy during questioning. Y.N.W. Melly's ex-girlfriend made statements that directly contradicted what she had said in past interviews and even previous testimonies. Initially, she claimed that Melly called her that night, panicked and saying things that made it sound like he was involved. That was the story she stuck with until now. Court transcripts reveal she suddenly backtracked, saying she misremembered certain details and wasn't even sure if the call happened that way. Oh, now she's unsure? Convenient. The defense wasted no time tearing apart this inconsistency. They pulled up old interviews, social media posts, and even text messages showing that she had told a completely different version of events before. And if there's one thing juries hate, it's a witness who can't keep their story straight. But it gets worse. Prosecutors were relying on her testimony to establish a motive, making her a key part of their case against Melly. Now her credibility is crumbling, and the defense is using it to argue that the entire case is built on unreliable narratives. This isn't just a minor slip-up. This could be the crack that shatters the prosecution's argument entirely. And if you think this is just a small courtroom blunder, think again. The moment clips of her testimony hit social media, it was game over. The internet is ruthless within hours. People began digging into her past, uncovering even more contradictions. Old tweets, deleted Instagram posts, even Snapchat screenshots. Fans are dissecting everything she's ever said about Melly. And let's just say, it's not looking good for her. Some are even speculating that she was pressured into testifying against him or that she fabricated details for personal gain. While that remains unconfirmed, what is confirmed is that this isn't the first time a key witness in this case has been caught in credibility issues. Earlier in the trial, another witness was exposed for exaggerating details, something the defense immediately used to their advantage. And just when it seemed things couldn't get any crazier, boom, new leaked information is raising even bigger questions. Sources close to the case suggest that prosecutors knew her testimony had inconsistencies before she even took the stand, but still moved forward with it. If that's true, it's a major revelation that could shake up the entire trial. Y.N.W. Melly's trial in turmoil as key witness crumbles. What happens next? If it turns out that prosecutors knowingly put a witness on the stand despite being aware of her unreliability, this trial could take a dramatic turn. Where does that leave Melly? If the prosecution's star witness is falling apart, does that mean their entire case is collapsing too? It's a dangerous game, and right now, it feels like the prosecution is playing with fire. If they can't recover from this, the defense could push for a mistrial or worse for the prosecution, a possible dismissal. Then there's the jury. How are they processing all of this? Because if they start questioning the credibility of key witnesses, it won't be long before they start doubting the entire case. One thing is certain, this trial just became even more unpredictable, and the fallout is about to get messy. When the full truth finally emerges, it might just change everything. Inside the courtroom, tensions are at an all-time high. Reporters on the scene described the atmosphere as chaotic, with defense attorneys exchanging knowing glances every time Melly's ex contradicted herself. Even the judge appeared visibly frustrated at times, likely because these inconsistencies are dragging out the trial and creating unnecessary drama. But while the legal teams battled it out inside, something even bigger was happening outside social. Media was in complete meltdown mode. Comment sections were flooded with people dissecting every detail of the testimony, exposing things no one expected to come to light. One user even found an old Instagram live where Melly's ex allegedly made statements about their relationship that completely contradict what she's now saying under oath. Another claimed to have screenshots of DMs showing she had been in contact with key figures in the case long before she was called to testify. And if that's true, oh, it's a wrap. That could suggest outside influence, something that could deal a massive blow to the prosecution's entire case. But let's take a step back, because amid all this chaos, one major question remains. If Melly's ex was lying, why? Was she pressured? Was she trying to protect herself? Or is there something even bigger at play? Because one thing is certain, lying under oath is a serious offense, and if the truth comes out, the consequences could be massive. YNW Melly's trial takes a shocking turn. Could this be the end for the prosecution? If Melly's ex knowingly gave false testimony, she could be facing serious legal consequences of her own. And if the defense decides to go after her for perjury, things could spiral out of control fast. But here's where it gets even crazier. Sources close to the case are now hinting that this trial isn't just about Melly anymore. There might be other forces behind the scenes, people who don't want the full truth to come out. If that's the case, this trial is way bigger than anyone ever imagined. So what happens next? Will the prosecution find a way to recover from this massive mistake? Will the defense capitalize on the chaos to push for an early victory? And most importantly, does this mean YNW Melly could actually be walking free sooner than expected? Because if one thing is clear, it's that this trial is wildly unpredictable and anything can happen. With the courtroom already in turmoil and the prosecution scrambling to regain control, Melly's defense team seized the opportunity. They wasted no time flipping the situation against the prosecution, arguing that if their key witness couldn't be trusted, then how much of the case could be trusted at all? That's when things took a major turn. Melly's legal team began dismantling the entire case against him, highlighting inconsistencies not just in his ex-girlfriend's testimony, but throughout the prosecution's argument. They pointed out how multiple key witnesses had changed their statements over time, how evidence had been reinterpreted to fit a certain narrative, and most damning of all, how law enforcement itself seemed to be fumbling critical details. The prosecution was on the ropes, desperately trying to regain its footing. And then boom. Another bombshell dropped, a new piece of evidence surfaced, and it wasn't just some minor technicality. This was the kind of mistake that could flip the entire case upside down. One of the prosecution's strongest arguments had been Melly's alleged location at the time of the crime. They had used phone records and GPS tracking to claim he was at the scene when the shots were fired. But now, that evidence was being called into question in a way that could change everything. YNW Melly's defense strikes back. Could new evidence crumble the case? Melly's defense team wasn't about to let the prosecution's version of events go unchallenged. They brought in their own independent expert to analyze the GPS data, and their findings were nothing short of shocking. According to their analysis, the prosecution's claims about Melly's location were far less reliable than they had led the court to believe. In fact, the expert suggested that the data could support an entirely different timeline, one in which Melly wasn't even near the crime scene when the shooting took place. This was a massive development. If the prosecution's timeline didn't hold up, then the entire foundation of their case could start to crumble. And the jury? They were witnessing every twist in real time. Legal analysts present in the courtroom noted that jurors seemed increasingly skeptical as more inconsistencies were exposed. In a trial like this, perception is everything. If the jury starts doubting the prosecution's ability to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, that doubt can snowball into a verdict in Melly's favor. But then, things escalated even further. The defense shifted its focus to another critical aspect of the case: the forensic evidence. The prosecution had previously relied on expert testimony to argue that the gunshot wound suggested an execution-style attack from inside the vehicle. This was supposed to be one of their strongest points, reinforcing the claim that Melly was the shooter. However, the defense had done their homework. They brought in their own forensic specialist and expert with years of experience in high-profile cases who directly challenged the prosecution's conclusions. According to this expert, the bullet trajectory and blood spatter patterns were far less definitive than the state had claimed. In fact, they proposed an entirely different possibility, that the shots could have come from outside the vehicle, not inside. If true, this completely undermines the prosecution's theory. Their entire case hinges on the idea that Melly and his co-defendant staged a drive-by shooting to cover up the real crime. But if forensic evidence doesn't clearly support that version of events, the jury is left with more questions than answers. And in a criminal trial, when doubt creeps in, it almost always benefits the defense. And speaking of doubt, let's talk about the people who were closest to Melly at the time of the crime, because their involvement might raise even more questions about what really happened that night. Why Melly's trial takes a dramatic turn is the case falling apart. As the trial continues, more and more people from Melly's inner circle are speaking out, and not all of them are backing the prosecution. Some have stated that in the days following the crime, Melly showed no signs of guilt, no unusual behavior, nothing that would suggest he had just committed an unthinkable act. Others have pointed out that the prosecution's case seems to be built more on assumptions than solid, undeniable proof. And then there are the rumors. A growing number of voices within the hip-hop community are beginning to question whether this case is as straightforward as it appears. Some believe there's more to the story details that haven't yet been revealed. When that kind of speculation mixes with social media, it spreads like wildfire. Hip-hop bloggers, YouTube commentators, and even major rap artists have started weighing in. Some argue that Melly's case is just another example of law enforcement unfairly targeting rappers, while others believe there's a deeper conspiracy at play. Regardless of where people stand, one thing is clear. This trial is far from over, and the next few days could be critical. So what happens next with the prosecution backed into a corner? They have a difficult decision to make. Do they double down on their case and push forward, hoping the jury still sees Melly as guilty? Or do they consider damage control, possibly even negotiating a deal before the entire case collapses? Because let's be real, if the defense keeps exposing weaknesses like this, it won't be long before the jury starts questioning whether Melly should have even been charged in the first place. And we haven't even talked about Melly's reaction. People inside the courtroom have noted that he's remained surprisingly calm throughout the trial. Even when the prosecution was throwing everything they had at him, he never appeared rattled. But now? Now that the case seems to be shifting in his favor, he looks more confident than ever. Some reports even claim he's been seen smirking at key moments, almost as if he knows something the rest of us don't. That alone has sparked even more speculation. Could it be that Melly and his legal team always knew the case was weaker than it seemed? And if so, what does that mean for the trial's final outcome? New witness may have actually weakened it. Instead of delivering a knockout blow, the prosecution's so-called ace up the sleeve started to look more like a desperate gamble. From the moment they took the stand, skepticism filled the courtroom. Who was this person? Why were they only coming forward now? And most importantly, could they even be trusted? The witness claimed they had been close to Melly and his circle at the time of the crime, alleging that they had overheard conversations where Melly supposedly bragged about what happened. The prosecution seized the moment, painting Melly as an arrogant young rapper who believed he was untouchable. But then came the cross-examination. The defense wasted no time picking apart the witness's credibility. They exposed inconsistencies in their story, questioned their past legal troubles, and even suggested they had ulterior motives for testifying. Had they been offered a deal? Were they pressured into speaking out? As the defense dismantled their testimony, the so-called bombshell witness began to crumble. Legal analysts watching the trial noted that this may have been one of the prosecution's biggest blunders so far. Instead of solidifying their case, this testimony seemed to create even more doubt. If this was their last-ditch effort to turn things around, it might have just backfired spectacularly. With this latest setback, the question now looms larger than ever. Is the prosecution running out of options? And if so, is YNW Melly closer to walking free than anyone ever expected? The victims, and emphasizing the tragic loss of life. They urged the jury to focus on the evidence they had presented, insisting that Melly was responsible despite the inconsistencies and doubts raised by the defense. But the defense was ready. They took a completely different approach, hammering home the weaknesses in the prosecution's case. They reminded the jury of the unreliable witnesses, the contradictory testimonies, and the flawed forensic evidence. They highlighted how law enforcement had mishandled key pieces of evidence and suggested that the entire investigation had been riddled with errors from the start. Then, in what might have been their most powerful moment, the defense doubled down on the idea of reasonable doubt. They told the jury that if there was even the slightest uncertainty about Melly's guilt, they had a duty to acquit. They didn't need to prove Melly was innocent. The prosecution had to prove he was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And after everything that had unfolded in court, could anyone truly say they had no doubt left? As both sides made their final pleas, the tension in the courtroom was unbearable. Reporters noted that the jury members remained expressionless, making it impossible to gauge which way they were leaning. Meanwhile, social media was on fire, with fans and critics alike debating every angle of the case. Some insisted that Melly was being unfairly targeted, while others believed justice still had to be served. Now, with the closing arguments wrapped up, all eyes were on the jury. The fate of YNW Melly was in their hands, and whatever their decision, it was bound to send shockwaves through the hip-hop world and beyond. The victims and urged the jury to serve justice. But let's be honest, was it enough? Because when the defense took the floor, they didn't hold back. They systematically tore apart the prosecution's case, replaying footage of Melly's ex-girlfriend, contradicting herself, exposing flaws in the forensic evidence, and hammering home the biggest point of all. The state had not proven guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And then, the moment everyone had been waiting for, the jury was left to make one of the most difficult decisions of their lives. This wasn't just about a rapper. This was a high-profile case with massive public attention. No matter what verdict they reached, the impact would be felt far beyond the courtroom. After days of intense deliberation, the jury finally reached a decision. The atmosphere was electric. Cameras flashed, reporters scrambled to break the news, and fans around the world held their breath. Then it happened. The jury foreman stood up, read the verdict, and the courtroom erupted. Some gasped in shock, others cheered. The prosecution looked stunned. And Melly? He sat there with the slightest smirk, as if he had known this moment was coming all along. And just like that, the internet exploded. Twitter crashed, Instagram lit up, YouTube commentators rushed to go live. No matter what side people were on, one thing was undeniable: this trial would be talked about for years to come. But now, the real question is, what happens next? If Melly walks free, does he go right back to making music? Will he drop a song about the trial? Will this case become an infamous chapter in hip-hop history? Or if the verdict goes the other way, what's next for his legal team? Will they immediately push for an appeal? Could new evidence surface down the line? One thing is for sure, this case isn't just ending. It's about to become part of history.